So we're a coalition of students, faculty, and alumni calling on Princeton to divest from fossil fuels and to reinvest it responsibly. We started just over a year ago when a group of students and alumni teamed up to write an open letter to President Eisgruber. And less than a year later, we have currently close to 1,700 students, faculty, and alumni who have signed the pledge that states that they're going to withhold donations until Princeton divests from fossil fuels.
Longer formal process than we would like. The resources committee and the board of trustees, they have different criteria for passing something like this. So the resources committee, they're supposed to determine that there's consensus and that a proposal follows the values of the university. At the beginning of this, we asked, okay, what do we have to do to show that there's consensus? And they would say, well, there's really no definition for consensus. And so we'd ask, okay, so what are the values of the university that we have to follow? And they say, well, there's no defined values of the university.
But to address the climate crisis in a hugely substantial way of getting us off of fossil fuels. So while we are protracted and are struggling, we must also act now.
Thing that we did was to start holding discussions or online webinars, and that became normalized very quickly at the start of the pandemic, and so we got involved, and I think it allowed us to bring to campus people that we didn't have the budget to bring to campus, and allowed us to host conversations that would have been much harder to organize prior, and got really good engagement. And so we went from there.
The reality is that Princeton in particular has a brand name, and it's within that context that I'd like to look at the divestment decision. Sure, Princeton investments alone don't make a huge difference on the decisions of firms. Sure, these firms will probably fight to the death, in fact, to stay in business. But the reality is, unless all of us, all institutions, and all people start to wrestle with these issues, the image of the world you want yourself, your children, your grandchildren to live in, then we're missing a big part of the solution.
If you think cynically, you sometimes might think of a place like Harvard or Princeton as a large hedge fund that has a university on the side. If you're less cynical, you might think they really want this money so they can keep giving scholarships and hiring professors. However you want to think about it, it turns out to have been a terrible argument.
Working with Divest Princeton for me has been a real education. I've learned about the deception practiced by fossil fuel companies for decades. The clear evidence that they knew about global warming, they knew that their products were causing it, but they buried the information and silenced their own scientists. That really changed my opinion.
So when I saw a notice for Divest Princeton a number of years ago, I went up and when I saw it, I joined. The best part of it for me has been working with the students who want to influence what happens at the institution of which they're a part.
Princeton needs to divest. Get it together. And so I hope all the students on this call will join Princeton's divestment campaign and push your university to be on the right side of history. I mean, you guys don't need any more money. You'll be fine without fossil fuel investments.
And the gathering of signatures from alumni who refuse to subsidize fossil fuel extraction through Princeton's endowment was a perfect high-level opportunity to make good use of the privilege associated with being a graduate.
As I said, the Resources Committee is working toward a set of recommendations that we'll submit to the Board of Trustees in the coming months.
We continue to believe that we can make progress by engagement with companies, perhaps more so than through dissociation from companies.
Happy spring from all of us at ExxonMobil. Congratulations, Princeton. Earth Day came and went, and you didn't budge. You didn't play politics and give in to demands to divest from fossil fuel. You just sat there like that ship on the news that got stuck. No, not that ship. That ship. We're with it. We're totally lit, fam. And you know what? We totes my goats care about the livable futures of students just like you.
Let's all grab a glass of Texas crude and toast another 5 years without consequence. Bottoms up.
And one of the cool things I got to do while organizing with Divest Princeton was to participate in what we call the SAM project. We drafted and filed a legal complaint with the New Jersey's Attorney General's office, asking for the office to open an investigation against Princeton's investments in fossil fuel companies. There is a law in New Jersey that governs the way that charitable and nonprofit institutions such as Princeton invest and profit from their assets, and requires them to be using those investments and those profits towards the greater benefit of the state of New Jersey and its inhabitants.
The Divest Princeton research team started maybe in 2020, before my time, with research into power and money at Princeton and how that's impacted the response to divestment and climate change. They named Andlinger as receiving money from Exxon, and Princeton's premier climate research center carbon mitigation initiative as being fully funded by BP. They also called out foundations that give large amounts to Princeton with a deep legacy of climate denial, misinformation, as well as right-wing, racially charged propaganda. And finally, they highlighted all sorts of conflicts of interest and issues with lack of transparency on the Princeton Board of Trustees. So, fast forward a year, I got involved with the research team in early 2022. We started looking in the Princeton archives and uncovered a deep, long-term connection to Exxon, some really crazy letters that were written between the former Princeton president and CEO of Exxon. Then, I stumbled across an Exxon representative in the Andlinger Center, sitting in on classes, even teaching while the professor was out of town, cherry-picking projects to fund for Exxon's benefit. He told me this was happening at other universities too. So we worked with The Guardian to get the news out, and we're on the front page of The Guardian for at least 24 hours, which was very exciting. While this was all happening, Princeton dissociated from a handful of companies, including Exxon, so this representative left.
That hope comes from young people worldwide who are out on the streets today.